Hello, welcome to day 22 of 99 Days of Deeper Embodiment. My name is Jason King, and this is my live stream. Thank you for joining. If this is your first time here, welcome. This is a 99-day satsang series that I started. Now I'm day 22. Okay, so I'm just tapping in here, feeling a lot of stuff coming up. Oh my goodness, wow. So I'm feeling a lot of this anxiety that is showing up for a lot of people. And that has been a recurring theme throughout the past few days. So obviously it's a recurring theme in embodiment. When you get really keyed into what moves us, what is it that's really moving us? The sensation of it. So say, for example, that I have to make a choice. The choice to stay in a relationship or leave the relationship. This is a choice that comes up for so many of us so often in life, right? It's like, do I stay or do I go? Do I stay or do I go? I think that's a song. So do I stay or do I go? And so now we're confronting this decision. And when we're confronting this decision, there's a lot of ideas that come up. So how do we normally make decisions? Maybe we do a list of pros and cons. It's like pro list. He pays for my house. Yeah, okay. Con list. He makes me take it in the butt. Oh, okay. I'm joking. Don't ignore that. But seriously, we make a pro and a con list often, right? So when we make a pro and a con list, the Clash is the band that sings, do I stay or do I go? So we make a pro and a con list, and with our pro and our con list, what are we doing? We're feeling ideas. That's all that is. It's ideas. And so I make my pro and my con list, and I have a whole bunch of ideas in the pros and a whole bunch of ideas in the cons for both potentials. Now, wouldn't it be easier if I could just feel which potential was heavier? Wouldn't that make it a lot easier? Then I wouldn't have to make a pro and a con list and see all the ideas that are there? So what often moves us, and almost moves everything on the planet really, is the feeling of anxiety. It's the feeling that there's something uncomfortable here. And so if I make the pro and the con list, and in the pro column is things like, well, it's the best opportunity for expansion. What exactly does that mean? What would the best opportunity for expansion look like? What does it feel like? And so let's paint a picture of this so that we can see it clearly together. Let's say I'm in a relationship, so because we're using this example now. And in this relationship, there is an imbalance in finances where I'm paying for everything, and then in my case, he's there with me and spending all of my money on things that are good for him. You know, this is a typical imbalance that happens in many relationships and has happened in mine. Just the financial imbalance alone, we can look at that, and so let's take both options. One option is, okay, I'm going to leave. I'm going to drop this fully and completely. And then the other option is I stay. So in the one option where I stay, there could be like a lot of pros. I like my house. My stuff is really nice. It's really comfortable here. We have a lot of fun together. We get along really well. We do a lot of things together, and I like the company. We enjoy each other. You know, maybe the sex is really good. Who knows? Lots of different pros, right? To stay. So then what are the cons? Oh, well, there's an imbalance in the finances. I'm spending a lot, um, and then a lot of my energy is pulled into maintaining the relationship. It feels like I'm always in their orbit. It feels like I can't lift myself up off the ground because I'm always focused on them. Yeah. So these could be cons. And I'm speaking from personal experience here because it's just easier to conceptualize. So this is something that has played out for me. It's a pattern that's played out for me. Um, and so it can look similar for you, but in many different areas of life. I'm using a relationship because it's really easy to look at. But a relationship is with anything. A relationship is with a job. A relationship is with a family, a mother, father. A relationship is with a location. A relationship is with anything at all. Food. Food is a relationship. So it's really easy to see when it's between two people. Make the list of pros and cons. What are the ideas on both sides? So now I make the list of pros and cons of leaving. Okay, so the pro would be, now I can tap into my own creativity. All of my time isn't spent maintaining this relationship. Then a con would be, well, there's a lot of benefits in cultivating love. There's a lot of benefits to experiencing that love. And it feels like I'm much more myself when I'm with somebody and I'm experiencing that vibration on a regular basis. Then a pro could be, but I move into embodying that on my own without having the reflection. A con could be, well, I feel off balance if I don't have that reflection. Or I'm afraid to lose it. I'm afraid that I might feel like that feeling of not being whole and complete, of lack. I might feel that. So notice here as I'm bringing this out, and in a vulnerable way, because these are things that I felt through myself. Notice here that there's a lot of sensations that come up around this exercise. Just notice the sensations. And you can run through this exercise with anything in your life. And notice the sensations that arise. Recognize them. Say, for instance, what is coming up for you is that there's not an income stream right now. And that is putting pressure on you to make a decision. And in putting pressure on you to make a decision, then you have to decide whether to continue renting where you're at or to leave. And maybe go back and live with your parents or go back and live with friends. or however that looks for you. Doesn't matter. Now, feel all of the sensations that come up around that as you're just tapping into it, as you're beginning to feel around the potentials, around the potentials for the choice, either or. And notice that what holds us in place frozen, what keeps us frozen without allowing us to move in one direction or the other, is these sensations, which feel like anxiety. They feel heavy. When they hit the heart, when they hit the body, they feel heavy. So it doesn't matter what the pros or cons are. It really doesn't even matter which direction the decision is made. It's just that when we freeze in place, what is here? When we freeze in place without making a choice, what is showing up? And what is showing up is the sensations of anxiety, the sensations of panic. And this happens the most around intense change, where there's a lot of attachment, where there's a lot of ideas. And so around relationships, around living situations, around jobs. Around the structures that make us feel secure externally. Around presidential elections. Around systems that we have designed our lives, the rotation of our lives. Whether that be relationships with other people, or whether that be relationships with external structures. And so when this comes up, should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go? Feeling into the potentials around it is the most efficient way to choose and then move. And the best decision, the one that's most in alignment with your own expansion, is the one that often brings up the most anxiety. And so this is where there's a lot of confusion around this. It's like, okay, I don't want to make a decision. I don't want to make a choice. Okay, don't make a choice. Don't do anything at all. You can do that. You can go out into the forest and you can sit under a tree until everything around you just dissolves. And Buddha did that. So you can do that too. Mm-hmm. You won't embody, you'll feel it all the way through, and then it will just all dissolve around you. And you can do that, sure. But if you're in this for embodiment, then you have to consistently be making choices. There's no other way around it. So you can choose to stop making choices altogether, but if you are embodying, you have to make choices. And so it becomes a decision of what choice is heavy and what choice is not. What choice expands me, moves me out of limiting beliefs, moves me out of limiting ideas and beliefs. And what choice keeps me in contraction? What choice sinks me like a rock? And so this is how we begin to evaluate potentials. As they show up in the heart, we can feel them. And we can feel, oh, okay, yeah, this is a sinker. Okay, yeah, this is the most expansive choice. And it becomes very clear. It becomes clearly obvious. However, to move with the most expansive choice is always going to bring us into those limiting ideas and beliefs. And so as it brings us into those limiting ideas and beliefs, then initially we always have to hit them. And as we hit them, that's where the anxiety is. That's where the panic is. And that comes up in the body. And so what has been moving almost everyone on the planet is that they make a choice to expand, but then they hit the anxiety around it. They hit the panic around it, and then there's a reaction. It's like I made a choice to expand. It's the most exciting choice, but then all of a sudden I hit this panic, this anxiety comes up in my body, and I don't know how to feel through it. I don't know how to meet it, and there's a panic. There's a recoil, and in that recoil, that's where the most amount of damage is done to your timeline. As soon as you recoil, then your entire reality shakes and shudders. It's like your whole field is shaking. So your whole reality is shuddering because you're not stable. You're not stable on the choice that you made. You are not focused directly on that so that it brings you through the bumps, so that it brings you through the limiting ideas and beliefs so that they come up and are felt all the way through. And so that brings you straight back into looping. And you just start looping and looping and looping and looping. Like, why am I feeling so horrible? Why am I feeling so horrible in habitual thoughts, patterns, and behaviors? Until you feel those charges, forgive yourself, feel those charges all the way through, and then make another choice, and then start to move in that direction again. And depending on how big the choice was, how much limitation you wanted to push through with that decision initially, when you hit those limiting ideas and beliefs and they recoil you and you bounce back, it could be quite a fall. So you could be looping for quite some time before you have the courage to move out of that again. So now, as the light quotient of the planet has increased intensely, it becomes really important to have a conceptual understanding of this. Because if you don't have a conceptual understanding of this, and you're not really keyed into how it works, then you can find yourself looping in a way that you need assistance and you need immediate support to pull yourself out of it. Because with the frequencies that we're working with now, the consequences of that show up in the body immediately. And when I talk about consequences, it's simply energetics, in the sense that when you hit those limiting ideas and beliefs, if you can't feel through them all the way through, and you do recoil, then the symptoms show up in your body immediately. Now, this wasn't always the case. When the planet had less light and there was more density, then the symptoms could take years to show up. You could be looping for the majority of your life and then not have symptoms until you were of old age. But that's not the case now. So it becomes really important to have a savvy understanding of how expansion works when we're talking about embodiment and when we're talking about choices. So the most expansive choice is always going to bring you up against the limiting ideas and beliefs, which are just charges. That's all they are. They're emotional charges, and they don't feel pleasant in the body. However, they do dissolve, and they dissolve with your commitment. They dissolve with your will. Your will is what aligns you with your commitment, and then your actions follow through. And then it dissolves the limiting ideas and beliefs. Anyone who's ever committed to a fast and then completed it has pushed through this, has run up against this. So now the next question is, where does the non-dual perspective come in to all of this? How does that help me when it has to do with embodiment and when it has to do with expansion, which is actually quite a highly technical thing? I mean, when you really get down to it, there's rules involved. From the non-dual perspective, from the non-dual seeing, then it gets seen that it's all doing itself. So if it's seen that it's all doing itself and there's no me doing it, then the idea that there's a me doing it gets taken out of the equation. And when it gets taken out of the equation, then it becomes much simpler to stick with the commitment, because there's no idea of a me getting in the way. I'm not someone that's losing something. When those limiting ideas and beliefs dissolve, I'm not here losing something. So that uncorks the bottle in a way. It removes this idea that there's someone that is losing something as you pop through the limiting ideas and limiting beliefs. And rather, it's just the self moving through the body, and it's a natural process, just like any other natural process that's unfolding on the planet. So the resistance to it becomes much easier to feel. It's not personal anymore. And this is really critical at this stage, because where we are as a planetary collective in our own evolution requires that personal identity step out of the way. And we start getting connected to the fact that it is something that is naturally arising through all of us. There is a push for expansion that is naturally here for all of us. And so when that push comes and it's moving through you, if you get stuck on the idea of a personal you, and you're the one that's suffering, and you're the one that this is happening to, and you can't get around it, then you stay looping and your body begins to experience consequences. It begins to experience all of that energy buildup that isn't being met and resolved. So, having the non-dual perspective does not change the fact that there is an evolution here. There is a body that is expanding. There is a mind that is dissolving limiting ideas and beliefs. It just makes it a lot easier. At any moment, everything can be just dropped straight into silence. It does not need to be picked up. And the body can move with what is moving it, rather than getting stuck on ideas around it. And so really, it's about efficiency at this point. Because everything is accelerating, because time is accelerating, it becomes a question of efficiency. How quickly can you meet the ideas that are here and resolve them within you? How quickly can you feel through all of them and come back to yourself? If you have to be writing a pro and con list and feeling through all of that over the course of a few weeks, that is not quick enough. You'll sink. And sinking at this point, there's no guarantee that you'll come back from that. Because your energy bodies will just get beat up. Because they'll just be feeling too much density. And so when you're lightning and you sink like that and you go straight into, very dense ideas, it's like smashing into rocks. You just crashed into a mountain. So there's no guarantee you'll come back from that. So this is why what I'm speaking about is so critical. It is so important at this stage that you key in and that you maintain yourself tuned in to this broadcast, because I don't know anyone else on the planet that is actually giving it to you this straight and that is holding the frequency this clear. Okay, so there's a few questions that arose that I'm going to go into. Let's see. A question from Philippe. This is a long one, so bear with me. Awakening the higher bodies. I would like to know the link between non-dual clarity and that. It seems that resting as the self is independent of what appears on the screen, including the concept of higher bodies. Nevertheless, it seems that the dream of experience follows certain laws and progression, just like a baby grows to become a child, teenager, adult, etc. Awakening the higher body seems to be the natural progression of spirituality. Now, does resting as the self automatically optimize this natural progression? I ask because I've had bipolar disorder my whole life. I'm changing your language a bit here, Philippe. You say, I've suffered from bipolar disorder my whole life. So in saying I've suffered from bipolar disorder my whole life, there's a strong identity there. So that can just be dropped immediately. There's no you suffering from bipolar disorder. Now, we can feel that you suffering from bipolar disorder right now. I'm very sorry. There's a timeline where you believe that you are suffering from bipolar disorder, and I can feel that with you here. You see? I can meet that with you. However, there's no truth to that. So, Andrew Carmago, founder of the School of Modern Soul Science, says that what causes it is your higher body's unsuccessfully trying to awaken. As a result, you go from bliss and creativity to depression and despair. I often wonder if focusing on the self will resolve this, or if some other effort is needed. After all, not every sage lucid dreams, higher bodies, and not every energy master rests as the self. I think I've been answering your question, honestly. It's funny because I didn't even read your question before this satsang. So it's just what's coming up. So I think this whole satsang, I've actually been answering your question in a big way. However, within your mind, there is a lot of concepts. And yes, there is a highly technical progression that does unfold. And it does unfold naturally. Except that in that natural unfoldment, if the mind gets in the way and you get stuck on an identity, then that natural unfoldment, just like in my example earlier in the satsang, can stall, and you get booted back into looping because the mind jumped in. The mind got in the way. So what happens with resting as the self is that there's no mind to get in the way anymore. If the mind jumps up, you see it and you immediately drop it. And so what that does at that point is that everything naturally just begins to do what it does all on its own. So yes, there is a natural unfolding, a natural progression that is happening in the expansion of consciousness through the body. However, as long as the mind is online and as long as the mind is running, then through that process, as the body is feeling these very dense ideas that have been programmed into the mind, and the mind is dissolving, then if there's a reaction to them, then that can get in the way of that natural unfolding and create distortions. And it can be very painful, especially if you're very advanced in your in your expansion. So if your bodies have unfurled and you're very advanced in your expansion, and the mind jumps in, and there's fear or panic that comes up, and those bodies have to feel that, that can be very painful. And so the way to work through that is to just focus on what is, because the more that you focus on what is, the more that you rest as the self, the more that those bodies align with that frequency, because that frequency of what is, I am, I'm here, I exist, that is all of it. In the unfurling of the bodies, there is a progression of frequencies that you move through. However, all of it is encompassed within that curious unknowing and excitement of just being. And so we can look at it from the below, where there is an expansion, a push for expansion, or we can move into what always is and look at it from the whole and focus only on that. And that brings the bodies into their fullness without any resistance at all. Every time you get stuck on a thought, that has to be felt. And if there's a lot of what you're calling spiritual advancement, what I'm calling expansion within this experience of being a body and having a consciousness within a body, if there's a lot of advancement along that path of expansion for any reason, and it can be because of the use of drugs, it can be because of doing a lot of spiritual practices, it can be, because really going balls to the wall and pushing to expand. If there's a lot of expansion, but the mind is still coming in, and you're still getting stuck on thoughts, then in the upper levels of expansion where the bodies are really light, and your body is very light, any thought that you get stuck on is going to cause a lot of pain and wreak havoc in that. Which is why they all need to be dropped. I hope that's clear. So, there's another part to this. I feel your question, because there's some mind comparison going on as far as sage consciousness is concerned, and how expanded a body may be. And yes, there's many beings that have stabilized as the self and are resting as the self on the planet who aren't very expanded, because their bodies weren't actually meant to expand, because that's not where consciousness was when they came onto the planet. So a lot of that expansion is something that we already brought with us. So when you feel my body and you feel the degree of embodiment that's here and the amount of expansion that is actually here, it can be very different from another sage that came from a different generation. Meanwhile, it's all the self. And because it's all the self playing through us, ultimately, it's all the same. So the more that you move into seeing only the self, moving through everyone, then the less of this distinction between how expanded one body is and how expanded the other body is comes into play. When you look at the human body, every cell has a different function. There's some cells that are quite large that are running the brain, And there's other cells that are quite small that are doing other functions, and yet they're all part of the same body. So just the fact that there's comparison coming online, that is registering some sort of a linear progression, that indicates that there's a lot of mind movement. There's a lot of ego there. And that needs to be dropped in order to come into the wholeness of what you always are. So the more that you just drop into the wholeness that you are and make that practice the only practice, the faster that all of those very uncomfortable symptoms of energetic imbalance within your bodies will work itself out. There's another question. We're getting close on time here. I actually ran over the 30 minutes, but I'm going to go into the other question as well. Here's a question, and this is just, I'm feeling the question before I even read it. And what I'm feeling is the anxiety, the same anxiety that is coming up for all of us right now within the spiritual community. Because what is coming up for us is massive shifts. And everyone is feeling that. It's like you're seeing your reality around you and it's solid, right? This is my reality. This is what is. But at the same time, energetically, we're all feeling that there are massive shifts happening. And as we're feeling that there's massive shifts happening, there is a recognition that means that my reality as I know it or as I see it is also shifting. How do I move along with that? And so that's where the anxiety is. So here's the question. I'm having a conversation with my boss about my function at work. She sends me a list with stuff to do based on some values. The rules feel made up and artificial for me. Like when you go to your psychologist and they talk with all the right words, but it's off. So I feel doubt and fear coming up. How do I maneuver with this? This was the reason that I didn't want to go to work, because of the fakeness around it. So maybe you have some points for me. Indirectly, I'm working for the government. They like to map everything out. I've worked a couple times with these institutions, and I feel the hypocrisy and the fear in these systems. Anyway, what do I do in this situation? So I feel this very deeply. It's super challenging right now. Oh my goodness. Wow, because there's a lot of perspectives at play. And one of the perspectives is that we have to hold the safe spaces and not offend people and not hurt them. While at the same time, there is a strong push for expansion within consciousness and within the collective and for authenticity. And so what does authenticity have to say about this? Authenticity will call this out and say, no, I'm feeling this. I'm feeling this. Whereas the perspective that wants to create a safe space is really playing into the idea that there's someone suffering, the idea that there is suffering, and the idea that we have to maintain some sort of normal or status quo. And so if you can feel this, then you can begin to recognize and feel for yourself which is in heavy denial and which is moving with the truth of what is. So the truth of what is always knows how to respond to any situation at all. If someone is feeling an intense trauma, and that is what is coming up for them, then if you are tapped in and connected with your own source, with your own self, then the truth of you knows how to respond to that situation authentically and truly. You as what is, have all the answers. You know immediately, you can intuit immediately how to respond to that situation. So the more in sync you are with you, the more embodied you are as you, the less mistakes come through, quote unquote. The less confusion there is, the less distortion there is. You feel immediately what's there and you know how to meet it. So all of this need for creating safe spaces around it, for having rules around it, drops away. They're all fear-based, all of them. And we can feel that. Yeah. So right now, because there is so little embodiment in the collective, there's so much mind moving everyone, which when mind is moving everyone, there's very little embodiment of self, of spirit within you. Then the need for rules comes in. And as you become more embodied, as you become more awake within you and connected within you, you can, the feeling of those rules is very heavy. It's like, oh my goodness, I feel these rules. They're very sticky and they really, really prevent me from moving in a fluid way. They prevent me from actually meeting what is here fully and dissolving it. And it becomes very difficult to move within those structures. Because what is moving through you wants to fully meet what's there and not deny it. Yet if there's a rule there that prevents you from doing that, that says, oh no, you have to behave this way, then that gets in the way. And then if that gets in the way, then you're stuck with that, and then you have to work that through your system later on. It's like a backlog. And this is happening all over the place, where everyone is getting backlogged with charges, and they're like, okay, what do I do now? I'm feeling all these charges, and I don't know how to meet them, because some sort of idea or rule jumped in and said that what was naturally here right now had to stop. You can't behave that way. So in this situation, and I'll be completely honest with you, the more that I've embodied, the more difficult it has been for me to stay in environments like that, where there's external structures in place that limit my ability to meet what is and to be fully present with it. The flip side of that is that I can just remain in silence about the whole thing and just be present with the whole thing and feel it all the way through as it's there. But in embodying, there is a movement that wants to come through. And if I don't move with that, then it hurts my bodies. It becomes very painful for me. And so this is something that everyone in the spiritual community will be meeting in their own timing, that it's inauthentic for them to stay in certain systems or places or with certain people, because there's not enough awareness and there's not enough embodiment of that awareness to actually meet what is there, which creates the need for a move, because it's just moving with your own authenticity at that point. It gets too painful to stay in situations where your light is not accepted, is not wanted. And the idea that you have to stay there, that's your own limitation that you're meeting. So that's important to see. Those ideas that come up that say, oh, I have to stay here because I need money. Yeah, that's an idea that's showing up for you to meet and dissolve within you. Get into alignment is what it's asking. Get into alignment, because if you don't align, you're just going to continuously be feeling pain, charges that have nothing to do with you. Those ideas are not yours. The idea is that you have to behave this way and putting you into a box when you are way out here in your own expansion, trying to fit into that box becomes very, very painful. Okay, so the one more final question came in the chat from Sasha. I'll just put that up there. What is deeper embodiment? Okay, so I've been talking about this for 22 days now. So I feel like in some of the other previous days that it may have been explained, but I'm happy to go into it now. Deeper embodiment is bringing yourself into all of the body in a way where throughout the body there is the feeling or the sense of wholeness and completeness throughout the entire body. And in doing that, it uproots and dissolves all of the limiting ideas and beliefs within the socially constructed mind. And that is a conceptual way of explaining it. In practice, what embodiment is bringing through is a sense of being, of here-ness in every moment. That naturally embodies as the self, as spirit in the body, bringing it into a completed state so that the body is what it always was intended to be. So Jessica says in the chat, that was whose question I was responding to earlier about the job. She says in the chat, I have to stay there because I just started working after 2 years. I know this is not entirely true. To be continued. Oh, Jessica, I love you so much. I can feel that. I know what that feels like. There was a part with me when I was awakening and embodying very deeply that I was actually in the reserves, in the military, and I had a contract with them, and that contract said that I had to stay with them for another 4 years, but it just came up for me that I couldn't do that. In fact, the self was moving through me so strongly that anytime anyone was speaking to me in a way that that was felt within me as trying to suppress what is, or trying to suppress my take my power, really, because what is power? Power is my ability to focus on what I want to focus on, and so a lot of the masculine ideas that are on the planet today, they want to take our focus and pull it into what they want us to empower. So you'll see it all over the place. Like you'll be focused on something and you'll be feeling something, but then some masculine idea will come up, and that masculine idea will want attention. And it will just start to pull you into a story. And that story will go on endlessly, and you'll notice that all of your energy just starts to go into that story. And so this happens all over the place. And so as I'm taking back my power, the power to be with myself and to focus on only what I want to focus on, which is what true power is, then anything that comes in front of that, anything that says that, no, you can't be powerful, you have to focus on this, that came up very strongly for me. And as it came up very strongly for me, I could no longer be in the reserves. It was impossible. I couldn't energize that anymore. I had to dissolve it fully. And so I ended up quitting, and it happened so quickly within a day, and I was just out. And normally that is a process that could take months, but as I just sunk really deeply into me and just recognized, oh, I can no longer do this. This is completely inauthentic for me. And then felt that in the heart fully and completely, then it shifted within a day, within my reality. And I was out completely with no commitment, no nothing. So that is how fast it can shift. Thank you so much. I really appreciate joining. This has been a long session today, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.